So for this video, we're going to be kind of going over two different things at once. The first is that I want to show you just generally an overview of the mechanics of this so that we can, when we get to class, you'll know, have a general overview of what to move to do what. The other thing that I want to go over is I'm going to show you the mechanics of this by showing you certain things that should be relaxed. So this default pose has nothing to do with anything with how a human has ever stood in their lives. So I kind of want to tackle both those ideas at the same time. And the first thing I'm going to do is go for the most straightforward stuff, which is actually the arms. So the arms are a lot like our mechanical arms that we had in class. It's just rotations, I believe. Yeah. So the rig is locked off for certain things. So you can rotate the arms this way. The elbows only rotate, in that one direction, being elbows and all that. There we go. And so we can rotate them in that manner. Whereas the shoulders, they do have, a little bit more of a range to them. So I can turn the arms in, move them back a little bit so that I can then, you know, bring the elbow, bend the elbow a little bit. So we're going to do that. There is a second part to the shoulder that we will get to a little bit later, but basically you can slump the shoulders as separate from the ball and socket joint that's there. There's a wrist joint, which is just like the shoulder joint. You can, move it in all three directions if you would like. There we go. And the fingers are also rotations. You can, if you're like me and you're just trying to like get this thing a little bit relaxed, like right now, I can drag select, a little bit of everything, unselect the palm of the hand, and just kind of at least curl things up a little bit. I can then go back and say, I want this hand to, or this finger to be a little bit more. I can, at least at that joint, we can, in order to separate the fingers, I don't believe, yeah, these ones we can do that a little bit. So there's certain joints on the fingers that have a little bit more flexibility than others. But again, it's all dealing with rotations. I don't believe any of these joints are going to have any type of movement on them. Yep, it's all about the rotation. This is for like kind of curving the palm. There we go. As opposed to bending at the wrist. And you can see that the thumb isn't following it. So there's a lot of different options, and you can see right here, if I get rid of curves for a second, yeah, technically the hand's a little contorted, but this, no one's hand is that, it takes effort to straighten your hand that much. So we can, again, I can just drag select a whole bunch of things. Let's see, deselect that. Make sure I do select this. Oh, that was selected. The last thing you select is always going to be the same color as a regular selected joint, whereas everything else turns to white when it's like the second selected thing or beyond. So that gets a little bit funny. There we go. So a little bit relaxed, a little bit still pretty stiff, but at least the arms are starting to get better. The head joint, or rather the head, just has a little bit of up, down, back and forth. There's no face elements on here. That's on purpose, so you can focus on things. There is also a neck joint. So you can see that that's rotating from down here as opposed to the head, which rotates from right at the base of the neck. So you'll usually have to use both of these in order to really get any type of good motion. We're going to change that a little bit later. There are 3 other joints along the back, and they all have full sets of rotations on them. They just twist from different areas, and you can see that all of them affect a lot of the back. This one limits itself a little bit to the top, but these 2 are affecting, oops, I wanted this spit, there we go. Like this is spinning but it's twisting in here and then that's spinning. So you've got, depending on where you want the back to bend, you may need to use all three of these in concert with each other. Excuse me. Now, let's see. We've got this as well. It's sort of an override. Let me see the difference. Let's compare these two. So if we grab this one, it's only moving this up here and then the arms are following it because the arms are connected to that. But if we grab this one, these are following as well. So it's bending a little bit differently. I'm not sure what IKC stands for, I'll be honest. They've got a couple of abbreviations in here I'm not familiar with. But on this, we can also pull forward. You can see these are not following that particular control. So keep that in mind. We don't want this. These controls, there's a reason they're not following this, and that's fine. But it does mean that you can accidentally break things. Oh, I'm seeing here. Okay. This is for like a bit of squash and stretch on your character. With limits. Let me bring this back to 0. Yeah, so I would use, if it was me, I would primarily use that for squash and stretch and use this for actual motion because it's gonna function a little bit better. You'll see there's 2 arrows behind the arms. That's for switching from IK to FK. That's just like these are just here as an option. We will get to that later. There are also the same options behind the feet. The feet themselves, we'll get to in a minute, but there's a lot. This is the root control. This is the please don't put keys on it control. And I know sometimes we were needing to do that with the mechanical arms because there was limited, options for things there. But now really don't put any keys on this. You should be able to get any motion you need to get with your character. You should be able to get without invoking this. Now, the meat and potatoes of what I want to talk about with relaxing a character has to do with these 2 controls. There are 2 hip controls, and let's see. Main hip control, this one, and then this one's called root, which I guess they're using the word main. Okay, so they're using the word main for the global control, and then they're using the word root for this control. And if we look at the 2 hip controls, you'll see a difference right away. This one does this. You can see the entire top half of the body. All of this moves to the left and right. If I rotate it, everything moves. The feet stay planted because they are there's something there that's planting them there. But of course, there's only so far that goes, and it starts to pull up when the limbs are at their limit. That's the outside one. The inside one is only for the hips. So none of these other controls and joints are underneath them, this control. This one, they are. This one, everything above the joint chain is underneath there. This interior one, it's only swiveling the hips. And again, this is a situation where you will probably need a bit of both. Now, in order to relax this character, like into actually looking like they have a little bit of weight, we need to use this middle one. And we're going to use something for any of you classic art majors out there called a contrapposto stance. So what that is that your weight is usually set to one side or the other. And what happens is a cascade of things in the human body that's required to happen in order for you to simply shift your weight. So if I take this and I shift it this way, as if to say this person's standing on their left foot, a few things happen right away. Yes, we get this interesting curve and this straightens out, all good things. However, if we were to look down at our feet, for example, this foot has pulled away from the ground. This knee bent a little, that's good, but this foot pulled away from the ground. Why? Well, because technically by rotating this hip joint, I pulled the leg up. So not only do I have to, you know, rotate things, nope, got to use the upside one because we need all the stuff to follow. I need to take the whole upper body and lower it. There we go. There it is. I want to lower it until the foot is no longer off the ground, which basically means until this is straight and not bending. And when we do that, well, now this is a little bit more bent. Cool. Maybe that means I bent the hips too much, or maybe it also means that I have to do this. If you are standing over a particular foot, then you have to be standing over that particular foot. So if we shift our hips in one direction, the body needs to be over that foot. Now, this also does kind of look ridiculous. Why? Well, because this foot should be out a little and it should be rotated a little. Right? And actually, maybe this one should be rotated a little too, because to be clear, none of us stands exactly with our, feet parallel to each other. And now I've turned this foot out, but like the knee is pointed straight. Well, the knees work with something called a pole vector. These are probably one of the only things you're not going to rotate in here. We move them. This is a locator that the knee is pointed to. Wherever I move this in here, the knee is going to turn around to point at it. Which does mean, by the way, that when you're walking, you have to take these and like move them forward. I don't want that out that far. Even a ballerina, the knee is going to only be as far out as over the toe. And most of us are not ballerinas. So we are going to bring that in slightly from where the toe is, but we still want it turned out a little. I also don't want this thing that far away yet. I could turn out this knee ever so slightly for like later when I need to move things. All right, so we've moved, the bottom half of the body a little bit. This leg is now straight. This one's bent. This foot is out a little. Actually, while we're at it, when we relax our feet, we don't just move them out, sideways. We move them out forwards a little. Now, as I do that, that might mean having to shift where this is, depending on what's going on. Probably not right now. My foot was still off the ground, just a skosh. There we go. That's a little better. So yeah, that got better. But now, of course, the top half of the body. When we shift the hips this way, we need to shift the arms in the other direction. So if this is going in this direction, if I exaggerate things a little bit right now, then we can bring this line this way. So if this line is going in this direction, this line goes in this direction. Now it doesn't look quite right though, because not everything is moving the way we need it to. Remember, there's shoulders up here, and we can drop that shoulder a little bit. So there's a couple different things happening up at the top of the body, or that need to happen in order to make it look like we have slanted the body this way. We can also, if this doesn't give you the result you want, remember there is also this joint as well. So you can test out which one, does the thing you want it to. But I definitely want to slump my shoulder a little bit. And I also, see if I can select it from here. I don't want my head turning. That was one of the things that was throwing me. I was doing this and the whole head was turning. Unlike the hip, which will swivel only the hip and ignore both underneath and above it, we need to counteract the shoulders. So if you move your shoulders in one direction, but you want the person to actually be looking up still, we need to counteract that by moving the neck in another direction. And I just realized I've been doing quite a lot of work, and I'm afraid it's all going to come crashing down on me. There we go. Save that. And I'm also going to move the head, because there's no reason this person should be staring forward. And then I can turn off my curves and see how it's looking. Obviously, this arm is not doing anything yet, and I hate these fingers. And this is looking very much like some classical Greek sculpture pose, because I was looking up some classical art stuff before this, but there you have it. So the last thing I want to talk about is the shoulder and how this relates to that. So let's say I want this arm to move up, which doesn't move up above the person's head. Doesn't quite make sense given how relaxed the rest of this is, but that's okay. So if I want to move this arm up, and in order to have that make any sense, I am also going to can I rotate? Nope. Oh, wrong. We're going to rotate the arm a little bit. There we go. I was rotating it a little bit too much at the wrist. All right, so maybe they're like reaching out to speak to someone. I don't know. We're going to unbend the elbow, because if you're reaching out like that, you're probably not bending your elbow very much. But there's a few things to think about with this. Number one, there's only so far a shoulder can go, or this ball and socket joint can go before you engage the clavicle. And that's really what these are. These are the clavicle. This right here is the whole rib cage tilting back and forth, which is what's giving this arm some of its lift. But eventually, that just does not make any sense, right? We have to, if we're going to raise the arm, it's not just the ball and socket joint. You can test this. You can put your hand on your shoulder and see, right hand on your left shoulder, and see how far you can raise your arm before your right hand feels like it's got pressure on it to move up. And that's this right here. If I get the right, there we go. We need to bring that up. That will get the arm up. And then actually, now that I'm looking at it, I'm starting to look at my own arm and be like, what do I want to do? Well, I actually want the arm bent at the shoulder, not as much at the wrist. There we go. Now we're getting really classical art on this, holding up a globe or something. But keep in mind, if I move the arm too much, I may need to move the hips again, because the balance would be different. They'd have to counterbalance the fact that the weight of the arm is all the way out here. Now, I had the hips pretty far to the left, so I maybe don't have to worry about that. There we go. We're not really relaxed anymore, because now we're posing for like a painter or something. But these are the types of things that we have to worry about. If the arm moves, the hips have to move. If the shoulders move, you have to adjust the head. In fact, I'm looking at this now going, why are we holding something up and not either looking at it or speaking out to people? There you go. This is one of the soliloquies in Hamlet. We got the skull right here. Right? We need to, one thing affects another. If I swivel these hips, we have to move the whole thing down to one side, move a foot, turn out the knee, cock the shoulders, turn the neck and head, drop this shoulder, relax this arm and fingers, and etc., etc., etc. All of that just to get one single pose. And this is why we did not simply jump to human characters within, the first week of class. It is a lot. It is a lot to think about. But some of it does is helpfully counterintuitive. It tells you, oh, if the if the heel is off the ground and that's the heel we're supposed to, I'm sorry, it's not counterintuitive, it's intuitive. If this leg is supposed to be carrying the weight, well, then the heel shouldn't be off the ground. It should be planted firmly on the ground, and you can draw sort of like a line of weight. Technically, the center of gravity is going to be like right here, mostly on this foot, tiny bit on this foot. Another thing to keep in mind as you're working with these, I'm spinning around to get a general idea, but really there will be one camera angle, right? So it doesn't have to look perfect from all points of view. It has to look good from whatever your camera angle is going to be. So keep that in mind as we're doing, homework for this week and for other weeks. But that's most of the skeleton. The other video is going to go over the feet because that's a whole other ballgame. But yeah, just keep in mind as you move one thing, you might have to adjust another. And once you get into animating, remember to place keys on all the different things that you are changing.